Okay, let's get going. Everybody here I know will be familiar with the green economy, but the blue economy is a relatively new concept. It's much less well defined, and ocean assets are much less recognized, so that the understanding of the blue economy lags behind that of the green. Quick facts that everybody knows about the ocean: it provides at least 50% of oxygen on Earth. It's home to 80% of global biodiversity. It's an active carbon sink, absorbing around 25% of man-made carbon CO2 emissions, and it absorbs around 90% of the excess heat that are generated by those emissions. So super important. We need in Hong Kong and globally to transition from a marine economy where we derive significant economic value from our marine resources to one where we use those resources sustainably. Before we go do a deeper dive on the financing side, let's take a look, first of all, at Hong Kong's marine dependency. So very quickly, again, facts you probably know, we have 263 islands, 1,100 kilometers of coastline, 42 gazetted beaches. We've got 5,600 marine species, and 5% of our sea area is currently under protection. We have reclaimed land, 70 square kilometers, which is about 6% of the total land area. I think it's worth noting here that China banned reclamation for commercial activities in 2018. We have ports and maritime services, which is very important to Hong Kong. We're the 4th largest shipping registry, the 7th largest ship finance centre, and the 11th busiest container shipping hub. We have 5 undersea tunnels, 9 major bridges, 14 typhoon shelters, and more than 93% of our treated sewage is disposed into the sea for dilution and dispersion. There are 4 power stations, all use seawater for cooling and also subsea cables for transmission. Data comes into Hong Kong via 13 international submarine fiber optic cable systems. We have 10 landing stations on 5 of our beaches. Fishing provides food, although not enough to satisfy that insatiable appetite that Hong Kongers have for seafood, and around 90% of seafood is imported into the city. We have 2 cruise liner terminals and 5 government-owned and operated water sports centres. Hong Kong has 5 universities ranked in the top 100 in the world, with excellent research facilities. And of course, leading the way here is SWIMS. MPAs, we have 8 marine parks and 1 marine reserve. Of the 8 marine parks, 4 do not permit fishing, and 4 fishing can be done with permits. So here is the completed map. Well, as much as we could fit on anyway. So I think the conclusion is that the dependency on the sea is extremely high. So despite the ocean's intrinsic value, only 3% of finance globally is channeled into natural climate solutions. And less than 1% of this goes into preserving the ocean. Blue finance is capital, which is deployed as investment into water-related industries, marine, maritime. And it roughly can be broken down into these 3 different categories. So where are the opportunities for blue finance in Hong Kong? There's definitely the ports. The Hong Kong government issued an action plan in 2023 to make the 9 container terminals smarter and more efficient. And just this year in April, the IMO announced sustainable fuel targets to help decarbonize the shipping industry. So these new targets will come into force in 2027, after which there will be penalties for those who miss those targets. Hong Kong has an ambition to become a green fuel bunkering hub, so infrastructure will be needed for that. Government is already piloting electric ferries, so onshore infrastructure to deliver renewable energy to the electric ferries is also needed. And as we well know, in this group, ecotourism, the new blueprint came out in December of last year with a significant focus on island tourism, yachting, etc. Agriculture also could be financed with using blue finance. The financing of marine conservation, however, is more challenging, and this is what the research paper addresses quite a lot. It's currently reliant on public funding. And what we have now is post-COVID, we have governments that are fiscally constrained and the contribution to the ocean and the economy being under-recognised. Just taking a minute to have a look at the spending on marine conservation in Hong Kong. So this was last financial year. 5% of the total government budget was allocated to the Environment and Food Department. Of that, AFCD got 8%. And AFCD's expenditure on marine conservation was 4.3%. So I think that graph says a lot, and we really are underinvesting in our marine resources.
Can I just stop you for a second?
Yep.
So we're getting some comments. It's quite difficult to see the slides. I think I found out how to do it.
Okay.
So if you go into where it says the green, the share at the bottom.
Enter, yeah.
So if you go into, there's an advanced sharing option there.
Advanced, yeah.
You should be able to get a green rectangle, apparently, that you can just put over your slide. Can you see that?
Second camera or portion of the screen.
Not showing that option. Yeah, portion of screen. Yes, this one. So what you can do is you can put this green rectangle only over your slide, and that's all they'll see. And then you can still see your notes.
Okay, clever.
So you'll need to minimize that. Yeah, there we go.
So we get rid of that. No. We get rid of it. Just move that away.
Yeah.
So if I go like, can I make it smaller? There we go. Can do this. There you go. Now, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so finance for marine conservation is lacking. So how do we, let's think about MPAs as an example of marine conservation. How do we finance the likes of MPAs? Just wanted to, as we know, MPAs are they're very important for, as part of the blue economy strategy, we need to align the marine conservation with economic growth and ensure long-term environmental and financial stability. Let's just take a quick look. PPPs, these are public and private partnerships where government and private sector work together. The government's these are very tried and tested in Hong Kong. The government's key role is to offer long-term right to operate. Sometimes tax incentives, sometimes subsidies. They also provide regulatory frameworks. Private sector, on the other hand, can bring specialized expertise, new technologies, and efficient management practices. Nature-based solutions. think there's been a lot of talk about these over the last few months, which is great news. Just a comment to make here: NBS, they're not a direct funding sources or financing mechanisms, but they are highly effective investment strategies for restoring and maintaining healthy marine ecosystems. So a well-managed MPA is an excellent example of a nature-based solution. And I think you all know that some commonly cited NBS can be restoring mangrove forests, oyster reefs, sustainable oyster reefs in Hong Kong to improve water quality, are being piloted as well. Widely used in China are PES, which payment for ecosystems, sometimes also called eco payments. These are quite commonly used for protecting water sources, and they create financial incentives where stakeholders who own or manage a resource or benefit to provide a level of ecosystem protection. So these PES can play a crucial role in financing and sustaining MPAs. They give incentives for stewardship to local communities and resource users. So the beneficiaries of the ecosystem services, such as tourists, fishermen, or coastal businesses, can pay to those who protect these services, such as the local communities, conservation groups, or marine park managers. MPAs also face risks from climate change, from extreme weather, and ecosystem degradation. De-risking and buying insurance play a crucial role in making investments in MPAs more financially viable and resilient. You've probably heard of parametric insurance, which is a slightly simpler type of insurance, which can be used, for example, to protect against typhoon damage. The difference between parametric insurance and regular insurance is that when an event occurs, then the payout will automatically be triggered. You don't have to go through the assessment process and wait months and months until the insurance company decides whether to pay you and how much to pay you. The parametric insurance is, for example, if it's regarding typhoon, when the T8 signal is launched or is hoisted by the Hong Kong Observatory, then automatically a payout is claimable. Risk mitigation techniques are very important for private investors, as they are more likely to fund the likes of MPAs when financial risks have been mitigated. Next one. User pays, I think this is quite self-explanatory, but also I think maybe something that's not used widely in Hong Kong, and maybe overlooked as being actually a very effective and efficient way of ensuring there's baseline funds for MPAs. Fishing licenses, diving permits, shipping levels, all quite straightforward. The hotel accommodation tax in Hong Kong has actually been in Hong Kong for a very long time, but it has been at 0% until January of this year. There's now a 3% tax on hotel rooms. So, for example, where a hotel has harbour views or sea views, this tax could be increased to 4%, with the difference 1% going into the financing of MPAs. Tourist levies also commonly used in Europe. I know New Zealand has $100. It's called an International Visitor Conservation Tourist Levy. So I think user pays is very underutilized in Hong Kong. Conservation trust funds, these are an excellent way of securing long-term finance for conservation. The initial endowment of a CTF is often a blend of government and philanthropic contributions, which is then independently managed and to generate returns for ongoing conservation efforts. So while the initial endowment of a CTF is often quite large, it's a highly effective way for the long-term financing, and it removes the financial responsibility of managing marine parks from direct government funding. So this is a key that we'd like to achieve. It puts this commitment onto the independent entity to manage the funds, to generate returns, and therefore it reduces the fiscal burden of the government. Highly attractive, as once that CTF is set up, it can finance in perpetuity. Could have a quick word about blue bonds here. These are sustainable debt instruments specifically to raise capital for projects which support ocean and water-related industries. Issuers of blue bonds are governments and corporates, in very simple terms. Blue bonds issued by corporates tend to need revenue streams to pay the interest to investors and to repay capital at maturity. Blue bonds issued by governments, on the other hand, are generally to finance public projects, to repay old debt, and to manage the economy. So just a very quick preview of the blue bond market. The first blue bond was issued by the Seychelles, 2018. Numbers are still very small. In 2023, I believe there are around 64 blue bond issuances. I believe last year that was around 81. Quite hard to get exact numbers on that. APAC is the largest issuing region, and China is the most active issuing country. It tends to be corporates rather than governments that issue blue bonds. And renewable energy sector, this is primarily driven by China, was the most active issuing sector, followed by water utility companies. So while blue debt financing in Hong Kong is virtually non-existent, the city has shown extraordinary growth in sustainable finance and in green bonds. The first green bond was issued in 2019, and 4 short years later, Hong Kong is the 5th largest cumulative green bond issuing government globally. So we also have, it's worth mentioning that China is an active issuer of blue bonds. We have blue bonds listed on the Hong Kong Exchange, Bank of China, and the Hainan and Shenzhen provincial governments. So excellent momentum here, certainly presenting a strategic opportunity for Hong Kong to continue its leadership and expand into blue debt markets. Blended finance, this is also something that perhaps a word that comes up quite often. Really quite simply, blended finance is taking several different financing sources or mechanisms and combining them. At the moment, as we've discussed, MPAs are being challenged by limited government budgets and unpredictable donor financing. We don't have much donor financing here in Hong Kong for our MPAs. But blended finance will address this by combining public, private, and philanthropic capital. What that does is it lowers the risk for private investors, and it enhances the appeal of marine conservation projects. Sometimes insurance is also added as a de-risking mechanism and to make them even more attractive. So let's take a quick look at a hypothetical blended finance examples for financing MPAs in Hong Kong. So this is very hypothetical, but it could look something along these lines. So currently we have 5% of our sea area under protection. We'd like to double this to 10% to achieve 10 by 30. The average MPA spending since 2018 has been around 43 million, with close to 65 million being spent last year. and that was due to the setting up of the new North Lantau Marine Park. So just doing a back of the envelope linear regression analysis, we calculated that extrapolating the past funding, that this year we would need around 75 million, next year 85 million. So a 10 million increase annually between now and 2030 to achieve 10% protection. This means in 2030 we would need around 125 million to protect 10%. How do we do this? How would we actually finance this? If you look in the left-hand box, objective 10 by 30, these are the cash flows that we're hoping to generate. This year, 75 million, next year, 85 million, and so on. And until 2030, 125 million. How are we going to get that? We could establish, hypothetically, a CTF. We could, an initial endowment of 1.875 million, invested at 4%, would give us 75 million. That CTF endowment would need to increase by 250 million annually in order to generate an additional 10 million per year for the funding of our MPAs. How would this happen? We would need 250 million top up per year. Propose that would come from philanthropy, from blue businesses, from user pays. How do we get the initial $1.875 billion to establish the CTF? This could come via a government-issued blue bond. It is quite a sizable amount of money. Just as a note, the government ECF the government's endowed $6.5 billion for that, and the green bonds issued by the government last year were around 122 billion Hong Kong dollars. So it's a sizable amount. This would be the only input from the government. It would then be topped up through user pays, blue businesses, philanthropy, to $3.125 billion, which would then be managed in perpetuity. This would then remove 125 million annual funding off the government's balance sheet. Okay, so I think I've taken up quite a lot of time. Coming back, blue finance in Hong Kong, where are we at? There's been a lot of progress. We have a practitioner's guide for issuing blue bonds. Hong Kong has sustainable finance taxonomy, and that includes water management and wastewater management. There are key financial metrics such as the GEP, which is a valuable tool to assess the marine asset value and to help inform investment decisions. Very strong commitment from China, acknowledging the strategic importance of its blue economy, and signalling that it's committed to further strengthening it to ensure both economic prosperity and long-term ocean sustainability. So with all these together, I believe that Hong Kong is very well set up. Takeaways. China recognizes the blue economy and the stage is set for Hong Kong. We now need vision, creative thinking. We need collaboration across the board: finance, business, government, philanthropy, and science. This success is going to strengthen Hong Kong's leadership as an international sustainable finance centre and presents new opportunities in Hong Kong to enhance asset value, to strengthen economic resilience, to increase productivity, and ensure the long-term prosperity of Hong Kong. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much, everyone. Does anybody have any questions, anything that was unclear, or anything further to ask, or have you all nodded off?
No, thanks, Kate. That was great. I can start. I have just a few questions. Just to be clear, that the 10% increase, that is aligning with our increase in priority sites, right? I just want to make sure that that is aligned.
Yes, it is aligned.
Okay, great. And then the other quick question I had was, because this came up in discussion yesterday, I believe. The Airport Marine Ecology Enhancement Fund, is that sort of government plus airport authority, or where was that endowment originally? Where did those funds originally come from?
The funds came from the Airport Authority. They had to put that money aside. So it was linked to building the third runway.
Right.
So when that's part of their EIA, they had to put some funds aside.
Right. So that's not really
million.
sort of blended, is it? It's
No, it's not blended.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. No problem. Anybody else got a comment to add, or something that was unclear or needs further expansion?
Can I come in?
Yeah, Lawrence, hi.
Oh, Nicole, you have your microphone off. Do you want to go first? Oh, scared her away. So a couple of things, Kate. The first one is it was driven to my attention actually by a manuscript reviewer recently that there are either that payment for ecosystem services, PES, is used in a couple of different contexts, and I was going to highlight this since you referred to it being quite widespread on land in China, where it's done as compensation payments, as I understand it, and if you know more than me, please correct me, but it's done as compensation payments at an intergovernmental level with an aggregated payment for aggregated ecosystem services. And that's fairly distinct to how I've seen it used in marine protected areas with tourism operations and so on. And the reason that was forced onto my attention is there are issues of basically double dipping, which are not relevant for the compensation payments, but do matter when it's payment for ecosystem services. So people have to establish what ecosystem services would have been provided without the payment service, if you follow that.
Yes, I am also of that understanding, Lawrence, that there has to be additionality.
That's right. Oh, sorry, I forgot the term.
Yeah, no. And I think when it comes to MPAs, I have again, just in the research, this was used maybe as protecting coral reefs. So having local communities to protect coral reefs, not the same as what's been done in China. China is more terrestrial,
Yes.
and the watershed is one of their main areas that they use as PES. And I guess my thinking here is just, can we adapt this? Can we adapt this for the MPAs and use it more as a stewardship payment?
So then I mean, you may not have seen the comment I put in the chat. Thank you. That was a terrific overview, really helpful. And if we can share the slides, I guess we can just go to the report. Anyway, I wanted to kind of add the need, or my own sense that there is a need for us to be really cautious. So, I mean, some of the audience may remember that I was making similar comments when I was based in Hong Kong about the need to activate the blue economy. But there's also a real need for caution, particularly caution from the conservation side rather than the finance side. constantly seeing, people get very excited about opportunities to raise money. Let me give a Hong Kong specific example. I was on the advisory board for the Marine Ecology Enhancement Fund for the time that I was in Hong Kong. And I always felt that it was being spent a lot more on research and a lot less on things that were leading directly to conservation outcomes.
Couldn't agree more from what I've seen as well.
So just we need to be cautious that we're actually driving conservation outcomes and as well as acquiring investment. And very often the people that drive these processes have far more skill than I'll ever have in finance, but much less than the actual critiquing the conservation outcome.
No, I thank you for those comments. I think we did quite a deep dive as well, looking at the ECF, which I said $6.5 billion being managed. And a lot of that also goes to research projects. So I think there's a real need for more piloting of conservation ideas and actually trying to take some ideas forward rather than Hong Kong tends to like to do research projects. So I'm hoping this conversation might kickstart just a little bit more forward motion.
Love it.
And by the way, Lawrence, actually, I really enjoyed your recent article as well.
I'll ask the question then. Can you go back in your slides to the calculation? Well, actually, two questions. Firstly, can you go back to the slide that had all the different finance options?
Yeah. Perhaps didn't do that in a great order. Yeah.
Thank you. So, starting with the basics, is it fair to say that if you were looking at an individual MPA, then you maybe limit it to user pays, whereas most of these other ones you'd probably want to aggregate them together because of the complexity of getting all the finances together and all that side of things?
Yeah, that's probably fair enough. I think you could have almost two levels of financing. You could have your overarching financing for managing the system, the MPA system, and you could also have more of a user pays model for individual areas. But again, then the user pays, that certainly needs to be balanced with tourism, with traffic numbers and things like that. So that needs to be managed. There'll be some areas where conservation is a top priority. So we probably don't want any user pays there. We just really want to leave it alone and to let the sea life regenerate on its own or with some help. And there'll be other areas where we can do more diving. Maybe the Nine Pins is a good, when that comes on stream, is a good diving location. So yes, it will vary.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to follow on with one more question. Can we go to the next slide? I think it is, please, with your
user pays.
No, sorry, the one with your calculation.
Okay, this one.
Yes. So because the figure starts with 75 million, that includes the existing MPAs, does it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So if we said, well, look, the government's already committed to covering all the existing MPAs, and we would only contribute to the new ones to build on that, then the figure would be quite a lot less.
If that makes sense to pull them aside, it will be less, yes. But you do get a lot of efficiency by combining them. Particularly particularly the management of MPAs. If you're managing one in Mares Bay and one off the other side of Lama and then one up the Pearl River Delta, you don't get much efficiency there. But so yes, it can be done, but location will play quite a big role in it, I think.
I'm just thinking, I had never thought before now that, sort of any private sector finance might cover existing commitments. That would certainly be very attractive to people like AFCD. It's sort of a philosophical point about whether you want to go there, although of course you say there were some things around efficiencies as well, but that might be a big carrot.
But combining what we already have with the new ones is certainly, I keep saying, is certainly very efficient. But what it does also is that by 2030, it takes it off their balance sheet. It takes that growing commitment, which last year was 65 million. This year should be 75, but it won't be. But it takes that pressure and commitment off the balance sheet from 2030, and in theory forever. I don't like to say that, because I think probably in 10, 15, 20 years time that the amount will need to be revisited. But I think that's the sell to the government. Yes, it's quite a large amount up front. That's acknowledged, but it's only for short and sharp, 5 to 6 years.
Just one last one more comment from me was that, if private sector or philanthropic funding was part of the pot, then you'd have greater leverage to insist, for example, that the existing MPAs need to have proper management plans.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of that kind of thing.
Yeah. It then becomes a bit of a PPP. The government gives you the right to manage them, and therefore you bring in our own expertise, the private sector expertise. So yeah, definitely up some
Great food for thought.
Does anybody else have comments or questions?
No, I mean, thank you. This has been great, and as Andy said, a lot of food for thought, and worth digesting, and perhaps watching this again and really making it sink in. My immediate question is, well, okay, what's next, and how do we, fine tune this? Perhaps this is, a question of how do we fine tune this with conversations with the private sector, or the trusts of the Swire Trust and the other community of foundations that might be interested in this. I suppose that the larger question is, have we actually done stakeholder engagement in willingness for these types of solutions, and is that the next step in trying to figure out how we actually action this, essentially?
Yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head, and the answer is no. Stakeholder engagement. I mean, I've chatted and talked to people while doing the research, but not really trying to understand if they would commit funds or not. So that is the next stage, is to try to get, in fact, in more granular detail, trying to get a diverse group of stakeholders around a table and throw some ideas around. That's certainly what we're thinking.
Yeah, it occurs to me with that in mind that I don't believe BEC is part of HKMPA, are they? No, right, Andy?
The Biodiversity Expert Group?
No, BEC.
BEC, no, they're not.
Might be worth exploring that as a means. I mean, I don't know if they need it to be official or whatever, but it might help, so to speak, if they're one of the stakeholders that we might engage to engage others. Just thinking strategically here.
I think Katie's online actually. A quick chat with Katie. So hopefully I'll do a similar presentation, maybe with a slightly different focus, but to to BEC.
Yeah, I quickly checked that. I'm not seeing Katie online. That's why I'm asking. Otherwise, I would have
Okay.
asked it directly to her. But I did hear, I think Andy mentioned that she might join. I'm not seeing her, so
Right.
I think I did see her earlier.
okay.
She dropped off when we got to questions because she knew we were having an internal chat.
Oh,
That
right.
How
was part
polite.
of the request.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And fair enough. That makes complete sense.
Very polite. Andy, can I put in a quick comment on the essential question of stakeholders? And that would be just based again on my own experience. I think that a real opportunity that Hong Kong has is that the level of interest from stakeholders in the finance sector, or the shall we say the financial stakeholders, as distinct from fishers or people tourists that go to the marine protected areas, the level of interest there is very high to start with, albeit I suspect not well steered or not well directed, and but that's a much easier thing to direct, to bring to bear, than people that are actually initially inclined to be opposed. Does that make sense?
I think so. Somebody has their hand up. Please just speak up.
Oh yeah, hi. I just randomly happened to hop onto this conversation. I've not really known anyone. I've attended Andy's lectures in UST. That's all the context I have. I was just wondering, like the partnerships that you mentioned with like the public and private sector, they seem to be like on the larger scale. Are there models like like to talk about like the voluntary market, right, with the carbon? Are there models like the biodiversity credits that can be used for MPAs, where hotels, for example, put in money into these credits instead of like directly into the MPA, and then those credits are used to fund the MPA, like something like the carbon credit model or like the voluntary carbon market model?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I'd love to I'd love to be able to rely on carbon credits and on biodiversity credits. I believe they will come on stream. I just think it's and they're certainly there in the wings, but I think it's well, for me personally, for this research, I don't think it was something that I could push too hard, because I think it's still on the wish list at the moment. Again, I did sort of try to dig a little bit deeper and see if there was any activity at all on biodiversity credits in Hong Kong. It's still just a bit too early, even earlier than blue bonds. I think we have a chance with blue bonds, but biodiversity credits are not yet. Carbon credits, I'm a little bit more optimistic actually of carbon credits, but again, it's something that is very early stages in Hong Kong. I believe in the next few years, I think that we may see a lot more activity there. So I'm hoping so.
So back to the conversation about what next steps might be. Do you, or does anybody else on this call know anybody who's actually been involved in setting up, one of these, perhaps like one of these blended finance models for nature conservation?
I know that HKGFA are having a seminar on blended finance coming up. So it is, dare I say, if I put an order on it, I think NBS has been discussed a lot over the last sort of year to 18 months. And I sense that blended finance is the next sort of hot topic in the finance markets. yeah, so blended finance really is just bringing everybody to the table, and getting everybody to put their strengths in the middle of the table, and coming up with a structure where everybody works together. And it's an age-old thing, but collaboration, blended finance is all about collaboration.
Yeah, just thinking about trying to learn from people who've done this before.
It hasn't been done in Hong Kong, to my knowledge. I mean, there have been, going back to the carbon credits. My understanding was that New World Development bought some carbon credits from, and I don't know who the seller was, but it was some biofuel. So they sort of kickstarted, because in a way it's not that difficult to generate a carbon credit. Then you need to pay for it to be verified, so it becomes it comes into existence. It becomes a little bit more tangible, but then you need the buyer. So that was a very brave move from New World Development. That was 2 years ago, I believe. But we haven't seen anything since then. So somebody has to take the lead, possibly with the shipping industry, who are really going to be under pressure to make significant changes. Maybe we might see more. We might see some blue carbon credits coming out from the shipping industry. That does open up opportunities.
So I guess where I was going with that was just trying to think about whether we can learn from other places about what a sort of best practice process looks like, including all the relevant stakeholders. There are going to be people who need to be involved in initial discussions. Others will need to be sort of involved at certain times. It would be very easy to get the order wrong, and get people excited for reasons that we don't necessarily want.
Sure.
And sort of derail the process. So I'm thinking maybe if we can find somebody who can share, real life experiences of having done this kind of thing, and maybe we could map out a process, which stakeholders and when, and then think about actually.
Yeah, sure.
Setting up, starting a process like that.
The other thing that, again, I'm thinking is that I wonder, and this is not a small feat, so I understand that what I'm about to say is it takes a lot of resources and effort, but I wonder if it's worth actively organizing some sort of workshop between the end of the public consultation and when government has to come up with the final BSAP with, what would be targets, etc. Again, to workshop this with them and to really show them that there is an opportunity here. And again, you'd have to prepare and understand who needs to be in the room and what levels of government, and a lot of preparation in between. And you're right, there needs to be a process to be mapped out. But I wonder if it's worth thinking, as part of this process, to have some sort of event where you've got these stakeholders around the table who are working towards this with this very defined objective in mind, which is of, that 10% by 2030. And also the other thing along those lines of my thinking is that it seems fairly clear now that the government is going to be at least creating a new MPA, right? Or protected area, or whatever it's called, within the coastal protection park. And so not only can this be a sort of immediate case study that we can look into at a more granular level, but I also wonder if there's an opportunity for us in the sort of blended finance aspect to put a carrot there and say, okay, if we'll pay for the CPP, but only if this is I can't remember, are we saying three priority site deal? It's a sort of all or nothing. It's not just the CPP, it's an all or nothing, because we know that they're doing the CPP, but it's we want more. So to kind of, and carrots like that have been used in certain models, particularly when NGOs have been involved. in saying, you know, we'll help develop this financing model, but as you said, it has to deliver on specific outcomes.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I think what you're proposing, actually, Maureen, I've just put a proposal together or like sort of a terms of reference to see if and sent it to Sophie. Poor Sophie's not back yet, but to see if we could do something on the CPP. Could that be privately funded? Just as an example, and as rightly as you say, as a door opener to. But I hadn't linked other MPAs. I was thinking more along as a test case, more than a pilot. Like, it's the real deal. But let's use this as our first example, and then have the ability to roll it out and add others to it.
Yeah, the annoying thing about the CPP is that fortunately, obviously, but unfortunately in this conversation, it falls under the Northern Metropolis. So technically it's under the Development Bureau, let's say, finances, and it's the one, obviously it's the bureau with a lot of money. But anyway, regardless.
Okay.
Regardless, it could be something, because AFCD is going to be involved in that management, the management plan anyway, and that we're looking for an ambitious management plan that will fall, no matter what, will fall on some shape or form on AFCD. It might still be good to use that and to almost make it as a case study for what we mean when at least one of the outcomes is good management, right? Actual good management.
Yeah. Yeah. And a plan, a management plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly having leverage on the CPP is not a bad thing, i.e., to make it the biggest possible with the best management plan and whatnot. But I'm just saying, yes, that's the one area that has quite a lot of money.
Okay. No, that's useful info. That to me just seemed like the most likely one that was, forefront of people's minds at the moment. So therefore, they're perhaps the easiest to get some momentum and some feedback on. So
and the conversation, the channels with NMCO, the Northern Metropolis, coordination office are open. So it is a good opportunity, I think. We can work. Whereas AFCD seems to be a bit of so difficult to kind of get something innovative and people around a table. The feel, at least from what we're sensing right now, is that the Northern Metropolis people and the Development Bureau are quite excited about, having environmental wins. So that could very well be a good starting point.
This example is not, it doesn't let the government off the hook. They have to come up with a fairly significant, if for example, we were going to use a CTF. So creating a CTF will take a fairly large chunk of upfront funding. That could also be the role of the government, and then they hand the management over, as well as the topping up of the CTF to the private sector. Let's see. Anyway, I'm happy to chat about this further if you like.
Sure. Why don't we take this offline? It would good if you've got a proposal going around this, obviously under HKMPA and the fact that the working group working around it. I'm assuming that we would work very closely anyway. So if you need help in sort of fine tuning what that may look like, it's something that we've been thinking about as well. So the time is right and interest level is all there.
Okay. Yep. Sure will.
Very good. Well, we're at the hour. I'm not seeing anybody else's microphone come off. That was an opportunity. Right. So let's wrap. Thank you very much. That was everything that I hoped it would be, and we will share the recording with everybody on the call and others. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate.